At the time of this recording, it is May 1st, National Foster Care Awareness Month. And this episode is not only dedicated to that initiative of Foster Care Awareness Month, but it's something personal. This episode is far beyond anything that I've done before. As we talked about mental health, as we talked about stories and things and how to make changes to your community, I thought about doing something different today. Instead of sharing with you about the different topics that go into foster care or that surround foster care, I figured I'd share with you my story, my foster care story. So with that being said, it's not going to be a light story, and I'll even preference that there's going to be a lot of dark moments, but I promise if you stick with me, it'll be worthwhile. A lot of themes may include some touchy subjects, so listen with a keen ear. But with that being said, that will be today's topic, National Foster Care Awareness Month. My story, my survival, my purpose. So stay tuned. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Outreach with Reggie. I'm your host, Reggie Holloway, and today's episode is personal. What happens to a child when home isn't safe anymore? When too much happens in the home? When there's not enough space for that child to grow? When a lot of things are happening that the child's not prepared to face? And what happens when that child grows up but never really got a chance to be a child? That's the question I hope we get a chance to answer together. But with that being said, I hope you are doing great today. For the ones who are new visitors of the podcast, I thank you for clicking on. And while you click on, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and subscribe on all platforms that you're listening to, no matter if it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and everything else in between. No matter where you're listening from the U.S. and even overseas, I thank you, and I'm appreciative of you. And if you're returning, I thank you for your trust in me, in this podcast, and hopefully we can grow this thing together. With that being said, May is National Foster Care Awareness Month. This is about reality, the reality of it. This is about the identity of it. And this is about survival. Because today I'm just not going to be talking about foster care. I'm going to be talking about my life inside of it. This is going to be a part 1 to a 2-part series. And trust me, you're going to want to hear part 2. But before we get to that point, we must start where we are now and explain, well, Reggie, what is foster care? To those who aren't familiar. And if you aren't familiar, let's start here. Because a lot of people hear foster care, but don't really understand it. Foster care is a system designed to provide temporary homes when their biological families cannot safely care for them. And that could be due to many things. And sometimes temporary homes remain forever homes, or a longer period of time for people who enter foster care. May be in there a lot longer than anticipated. But like I said, it could be due to a number of things, which is neglect, abuse, loss, or overall instability of the home that may lead into why a young person may be in care. But here's what people don't always understand at times when we look at foster care. Foster care is not just a place, it's a experience. It's constant transition, emotional uncertainty, and overall learning how to survive in environments that don't always feel like home. And as real as that is, we have to acknowledge many youth who navigate the foster care system. And for those who stay temporarily, along with those who stay longer and transition out of foster care. And even life after foster care. As well as we acknowledge those who participate every day in foster care on the other side, those who are mentors to the youth, those who are not only mentors, but leaders, advocates, case managers, case workers, those who stay in the office a lot later than they intend to because they're passionate about the work that they do, helping youth succeed. Foster parents who go out their way to open their home, to make it feel like a home, to be a constant that is needed in a young person's life. And overall, a community of people that may have no involvement, but they see a young person down and they make themselves available and say, hey, I may not understand what foster care is, but I'm here for you. And I want to make myself as open to understand as I can. So what is National Foster Care Awareness Month? It's a month in May since 1988 that it's a particular set of time where we raise awareness, honor foster parents and those who are related professionals, those who are lead themselves in this work, this space. Organizations who amplify youth voices and push for them to make change in the system and tell them and show them that it's more than possible to do so. And as I talk about that, and the beauty of Foster Care Awareness Month, I don't want to waste any more of your time. I want to dig into it deeper. I can go on to the list of statistics, but I want to put a face to the statistics. Because behind every number, there's a story. And after quite some time, through therapy, through experience, through navigating it all, and being on the good side of things, I'm ready to share my story. So here it is. Back in 2002, I want to say that's my earliest memory. My earliest memory of being in foster care. At the time, I assumed that she was my mom. I was only 3, but I had a faint memory. But I remember the first time that I talked to my foster mom. And I won't use any names because legal reasons, of course, but I just don't know. But I remember her telling me that I'm not her mom. Or she's not my mom. Apologies. And I immediately felt that, right? I remember certain things. I remember being on a breathing machine. I remember the slight bullying and abuse from the siblings that were there, the children. Because the feeling, like early feelings of feeling like I was taking attention away from them because I wasn't their child. I remember the early sign of abuse that I experienced. And how it made me feel. I remember being at times choked out because I couldn't stop crying. I remember seeing my sister for the first time and not knowing who she was. And as time progressed, I stayed in that home from 2002 to 2004. So I want to say from 3 to like before I turned 5. February 2002 to like February 2004. And before I went back to my mom, I actually remember going to the courthouse. I think I had like a visit before where we all got together and I saw like some of my relatives before that. But I remember going to the Fulton County courthouse and I saw my mom. I saw this big, tall woman. And I didn't call her mom, I actually called her dad. And they said, oh, she's not your dad. And I asked her, where is dad? As any young kid would. I didn't know any better, but long story short, when I returned back to my mom, I knew enough now that I didn't know then, because I was 4. I was 4 years old. But this time I knew enough to know what was going on. We went to our grandparents' house and we stayed there for quite some time. But then I was able to see a lot of what my mom had endured. And I'll save a bit of the story for part 2, but long story short, within a year's time, I ended up back in care. So by this time, this is 2005, summer of 2005. And I remember sometime before when I knew that there was a time ending. It was New Year's and my mom was crying because I didn't accept $10 from her because I knew enough to know at the age of 5, like what my mom was experiencing and going through. So I told her to keep the money. Not knowing exactly where that came from, I just told her, just no, Mom, it's okay. And she broke down. But there was a guy with a badge. And I remember him bringing groceries in. He bought us McDonald's for the first time. I'm not sure what exactly this is, but it tastes amazing. And then he brought groceries because it was reported that we didn't have any groceries. Oftentimes enough, I would bring food from school, put it in my book bag, and bring it home. But I remember the last night, after he bought the groceries, I remember the last night I spent with my mom. Ordinary People by John Legend played. She had this big speaker. We were in the living room. And she gave me an hour later. And it was Purple. Apologies if this story seems scattered, but stay with me. I'm getting through it. In part 2, we'll explain a lot of the holes, but the last word she said to me was, I love you, and I love you too. And as we danced, I never really knew who my mom was, how the strong significance of what she was going through until later. But I know she tried her darnest. But that came with neglect. Oftentimes not seeing my mom, and of course not having my father in the picture. It was increasingly hard to navigate things as a kid, feeling at times like I grew up a lot faster than I should have. Watching my brother go through several seizures to the point where they told me that overhearing that my brother could pass away due to this amount of seizures he was experiencing. But to go back to the last night, I went to sleep in the living room with my mom as she played Ordinary People by John Legend. The next day, I remember seeing the same guy who brought us groceries knock on the door and say, hey, I need to see your mom. And I was like, hold on, let me get her. And then she told me because she fell asleep, she slept on the futon in the living room as her bed while giving my sisters their own bed and my brother and I our own bed. But she slept in my sister's room. I told her, hey, there's a guy with a badge. It's the same guy, and I don't remember his name at all, but I remember his face. And she told me, oh, just tell him I'm sleeping right now. So as any young man who honors his mom did, I told him, hey, she's asleep right now. She'll say, come back later. And I told her, hey, he said, come out. And she said, boy, get out this room. So I did. And I told her she'll be out later. It's all right. And then maybe 10 minutes later, a policeman came and asked for her. So she finally got up and I went back to my room. And then the guy told us to grab our things. And unfortunately, I went with my uncle, one of my uncles, I believe. Well, actually, no. We went with the defects worker. And I remember it was like a Ford Mustang. And I only remember this because, of course, I'm 5, but the seating was so small. It was such a small car. Like, I don't know what I get it. It was like, what is it? A GT5, I think? Yeah. It was gray and it had blue stripes. And I just remembered, like, man, this is an increasingly small car. But the last thing I saw of my mom was we're in his car and she's going into a police car. And then we drive back to our grandparents' place, and we're sitting in this car, and I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. But we sat there for like 30 minutes. And then we go to the defects office. And as we're going back to the defects office, they gets us something to eat, and it tasted good. I mean, Capri Suns, just to eat. But I remember like later, before we went to take a long trip, he told me to toss it on the side of the road, and I cried like a baby because I wanted to eat that. It tasted good. What kid didn't like Capri Sun, no matter how bad it was for us, right? But I go to sleep, and I get up, and now I end up being in Augusta, back into foster care. This time, for me, it was my second time, but for my siblings, it was their first time. All of them, I think, except one. But this time it was different because now I'm 6. Now I'm 6, going on 7. And I'm now aware of everything that my mom had endured. Watching my mom get arrested, watching my mom participating in drugs, watching my mom abandon us and staying in places that was just increasingly uncomfortable, along with a myriad of other things. So as I'm telling the therapist this as a child, he puts me on medication. And I remember how dangerous this medication made me feel, because I think this is around the first time Eight-Legged Freaks, I saw that, and it traumatized me as a kid. And the medication would increase, and I would begin to spiral. I had the best grades I could possibly have, but emotionally, I would have episodes, because the only thing in the back of my mind is I'm in a home that I don't want to be in. And the only place I want to be with my mom. And I'm on all types of medication, off this one, on this one, to the very point to where I'm hallucinating. I'm being suspended from school in the 1st grade because of my behavior. separated in a classroom with one teacher all day because how traumatic things were. So combine all of that, I ended up leaving that foster home. And I would go to a different foster home where I would be abused, for lack of a better term. And I remember when I got to this particular foster home, that's the first time I got cussed at. So I didn't handle it well. I was frail. I cried. Still academically I was great, but I'm being bullied at home, teased, punched on, bullied. The children in the home who felt like I was taking the attention away from them took it out on me. I was exposed to a lot of things that I shouldn't have been exposed to, but over time that just became a repeated thing. And the cycle happened again, but this time in this particular home I was at, I think this was my second home since being back. I witnessed for the first time both of a very abusive relationship between the foster parents, where the man is beating on her, she's beating on him. I'm witnessing her hit him with a shoe. I'm witnessing him fight her in front of me. Having to go to a different family home because the police was was handling a situation. I remember one time where I had to duck in the car because the guy was trying to find her. All of these things was what I was experiencing in this particular foster home. And as time went on, I remember this one moment where we was playing with a little BB gun. It's kind of like it shot off and then you see pellets just mix the sound like pop. But then when I shot it, it was actually a live bullet in there. And I shot it at the ceiling and the guy busted in with actual gun. And I didn't know. But that was also times where I was exposed to a lot of things due to me living in poverty with my mom that I just didn't get a chance to experience, like TV. Not necessarily TV, but just not sharing the same cord. But also having food. So give or take. But then I went to reconnect with the family. So I went back to a different foster home, to the same foster home, my first foster home being back in the care. And as I did that, it just didn't change. It didn't stop. By this time, I experienced more abuse, this time in a way that I'm now understanding what paperwork is regarding he's liable to have a mental episode or to lash out when he doesn't get his way. So I won't even say abuse in the context of that, but more so I'm being villainized as a kid, because by this time I'm 7. Had a weird experience with Chuck E. Cheese where the mascot kind of made my birthday suck, but that's neither here nor there. But I just remember being very traumatized at that age. And no one looked at my story at that time. They just gave me more medication. Lashed out some more and just took it out on everybody. My sisters, at this time, my brother is already gone from the home. So I lost connection with my brother, but I would visit him when I got back. My At the time, as the behaviors got worse, I was eventually moved out of the home. As far as like, I went to a mental hospital, and then from the mental hospital, I went to a different home, and then after the ending of my first grade year, while I was in a room by myself and secluded from all the other kids, and I remember being so traumatized and so angered and so filled with rage because of what I was enduring at such a young age that pulled a, I just got into a bad point where tried to harm people. Anybody that got close, anybody that wanted to get close, I just tried to harm them at such a young age. And I'm not proud of that saying that, but that was just my reality. And I didn't do it because I hated them. I did it because I was scared. But in the time when I was have to be in class by myself, they had the right mind to move me back to Atlanta by myself in order to get closer to my mom, to where I have visitations with my mom. But this group home, not this group home, this home I was at this time, this is where I'm exposed to my first love, which is wrestling. I was, but was also immediately met with more rage. Actually, the most oddly enough darkest rage I ever received, which was a lot of the kids there felt like I was taking away from their mom, to where I was getting cussed at for the first time. I remember being cussed at so badly that I saw a big weapon, and I remember just crying, and I just raised it at him, or I just walked to him very slowly. And I didn't learn that from any place. I don't even know where that came from. I did, but I just did. And I did it twice, and then someone stopped me and snatched the knife from me. But I remember that's how I was being bullied for those 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And this is also the time where the foster parent actually knew my birth mother. Um, as that happened, this just happened constantly over for the course of 3 years, where bullied constantly, physically abused, and as that went on, this is around the time that also the stop snitching thing happened and the boys will be boys thing happened. So as more boys entered the home through foster care and DJJ, I experienced more abuse. And it got to a point where I started to get expelled from school. I was expelled in the second grade twice. Once in the second grade, had to go to a different school, and then another time in the third grade. And I ended up going to like a whole like psychoeducation. Even then, it just got progressively worse, and no one can really understand because I was a good student academically, but behaviorally, I would lash out because I just did not. Everything that I was experiencing at home kept showing up in school. And I would lash out on the foster parents. And I would lash out on her, and I would lash out and feeling like, because no one's seeing, and I couldn't say anything because of the whole stop snitching situation. I'm also exposed to gang life because a lot of the kids through DJJ and just through the kids that were there, they were part of gangs. And I had to endure a lot. So much so that because of what I was doing at school, and because of what they saw, kids of the community didn't want to hang out with me because everything that has been done to me, I'm now being labeled as the person that's doing it. And it didn't help that I began to build a track record through the paperwork that was given by DFACS. So as time kept progressing, and as I moved out of that home eventually by being arrested, this would become an ongoing cycle of not staying at too many places for too long because of the fact of being traumatized and being overly medicated, with no one ever asking the question, what is wrong with him and what has happened to him to make him feel this way? On top of that, my grandfather passed away. And I didn't know he passed away until I turned 17. But before that, it just became a cycle of over medication, anger, frustration, and taking it out on everybody who loved me. And I stayed with that for 10 years. Up to the point where I made my first appearance. This was around in '08. And because by this time, my mom actually loses her rights to guardianship. And it was May of 2008. And I don't even remember much of 2000 and that time period because I just remember being numb. I remember someone saying a few years prior to that when I entered care, well, you won't see her till you turn 18. And I remember being that age. I was only 7. I'm like, that's a long time. But I didn't really understand the weight of what she said. She just said it. But when my mom told me, I watched my mom sign her rights away. And I wasn't able to visit her anymore. I remember how much anger I felt. I remember last time seeing my grandmother and how much she didn't recognize me because of how the medication, the anger, and the trauma. But so on and so forth from 10 to at least 16, 17, I lived my life in those 3 areas of traumatized, anger, and sorrow. Lashing out, didn't know how to regulate my emotions, and because of those things, I was put in critical and harsh environments because of what my paperwork said, and there was no sympathy. All I saw was a bad kid, but I want to go back to what I was saying about Wednesday's Child. Back in 2008, I make my first appearance on Wednesday's Child. I go on a radio show because Fox 5 or the local news station had a segment that surrounded foster care and adoption. And I make that appearance. And as I make that appearance, I remember going to school the next day and someone saying, "Hey, I saw you on TV." It was a teacher. She was like, "Oh, you look so cute and everything." And for a moment, I felt like, "Oh, okay, I got a little notoriety. I'm a little famous a little bit." But then in the same breath, ridicule came. And not only did it become about all just little kid jokes about your appearance or joking or making jokes on you, it became, "Oh, so you don't have a mom, you don't have a dad?" And the questions came along with that. And then as the years go on, and I had several adoptions that failed due to not being healed. Like I said, from 9 to 10, or however long, up until my 16th birthday, I make my second appearance on Wednesday's Child, and then eventually a third appearance on Wednesday's Child. being on Wednesday's Child 3 times, looking for a fairer family, I realized that I did a lot of wrong due to what I experienced, but I didn't know. I paid so much attention to all of the wrong that I did that I held myself to that. I criticized myself. I shamed myself for the amount of pain and sorrow that I caused onto the many families, along with being comfortable with moving around from place to place. Because once things got too familiar, I had to go. Even people like the foster parents who tried to discipline me, I didn't do well with discipline. I feel like you push too hard, I'll push harder. And it was hard to make friends. And as I got on TV more and went to adoption parties, adoption conferences, I would meet families, and in some cases, some families were willing, and I went through the process, and then it fell through. And I remember one time where no matter what I did, this lady really wanted me to be her son, but because of paperwork and because of an organization that I will not name, that adoption fell through. But I remember feeling sorrow to the point where I had to be checked into a mental institution because I kept punishing myself for the things that I could not control. Because I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. And then during that time of being in a mental institution, I was in several by 16 turning 17. Another adoption fell through. 2 adoptions fell through. But then I got a final adoption. Somebody wanted to adopt me. It was a family, a military family. But then I was at a crossroads because my caseworker, or my adoption specialist at the time, she posed the question: did I want to choose the adoption family or be reconnected back with my mother? And of course, when given such an opportunity, how could I not? It would have answered a lot of questions that I felt inside, that I dealt with for, at the time, several years, over a decade. So I got reconnected with my mom that way. And we had a call with my therapist in the room at the mental hospital. And I asked her, like, hey, can you tell me about certain things? And she even was going to come, but then she just never did. So by this time, I'm 17. I'm in a new home. And I'm about to turn 18. And my case manager or caseworker, who I known she known me since I was 9, all the way up to 17. She retires. And for the longest time, I didn't have a caseworker. I had a caseworker for 2 months. And then a couple of months before I turned 18, she was gone. By this time, I'm in a new group home. And I was posed the question, do I want to age out at 18 or should I stay? Because by this time, the plans to be adopted by my mom fell through, or being reconnected with my mother fell through. They didn't tell me as the adoption family that fell through that my mom was on Section 8 housing. And they did not explain that to me in my And I remember the foster parent at the time when I turned 18 told me, they don't want you, man. No, they don't want you. That's what they said. They said they don't want a grown man in their house. They don't want no grown boy in their house. Not knowing my plans, not knowing my journey, not knowing all the things I wanted to do, thinking that this was my family, my blood family, my biological family. And to hear that brought me to a new level of low. Along with a botched surgery, I had another surgery that took me off of all the medication that I took while in care. I was off it because it would have killed me, per the doctor's words, if I stayed on it and took it with the pain medication for my foot. But I say that to say I stayed in care because a gentle voice said to me, you should stay in care because all of the things that come with care. She didn't explain all of it, but she said well enough for me to know that I should definitely stay in care, which is if I had plans to go to college or anything like that, or to match my money, to do that. So I did. After moving to my final placement before I aged out of care, I would learn a lot more resources. And as I graduated from high school, a good friend of mine, and if you're listening to this, I appreciate you for letting me know. I learned about an organization called the Instability Foundation. And through him, I was able and another good friend of mine, she was able to let me know as well. I became very passionate about what I wanted to do at that moment in time because I was in a low place again. And I had mentors by this time too, along with the Instability Foundation. A name that I wouldn't mind listing is Dr. Lavizo, who was a good mentor of mine. She hired someone who's been a very instrumental piece to my growth, which is Dr. Camille Fiani. And to be poured into, to tell her my story. She saw me past the foster care stuff and said, I want to help you. I'm going to give you all of the things and I'm going to invest in you. It's going to be up to you to decide what to do. She listed a lot of things for me to get because I was such a low place. I wanted to be an actor, but it fell through and I was in financial ruin. And I was on check systems. But she ended up saying, no, you can get a trade. You can go to the workforce. I said, no, I want to go to college. Or by this time back into college because I flunked out the first time. So as that happened, I decided to give it a shot again. And as I entered college again, I went to a beautiful small 4-year school. And as I was trying to get focused and dedicated, I met an amazing friend. And that amazing friend, I didn't know how to regulate. My foster care experience showed up again. By this time, because of me moving from place to place, my instability, me not knowing me being socially awkward, did not know how to take in having a female friend. Did she like me? Did she want to hurt me? How do I regulate these emotions? Because no one taught me how. And I wasn't in a great space mentally to know how. But she was very patient with me. She was very supportive of me. And this is a person who I can say confidently loved me. And she was a great friend. Unfortunately, we're not friends anymore. But that's neither here nor there. But I do miss her a ton, due to how much she was a friend to me. And as I say that, there's a lot of things I had to navigate now, or as a new adult, not a new adult, but as an adult, and as my official freshman year was kicking off, I also was turning 21 that year, that semester. First full semester. And I remember not having an ILS worker that I checked in with for some time until for like 3 weeks. And she said, well, there's not much I can do for you now. And I remember the Section 8 housing. I didn't qualify at the time for like what I know now to be the foster youth to success, or the FYI vouchers that many of foster youth who transition out of care qualify for. And I was actually guided towards Section 8 housing, but I decided I'll stay on campus, or the group home I was at gave me the luxury of staying there throughout college breaks until they dissolved. And while that was happening, as years went on, I flunked out of college, and I had to get right back, find my way to get back into school, because the place I knew actually dissolved its living their ILP housing. So I was homeless while I aged out of care. Now every statistic that I heard, the 3% at the time, and I believe is a lot greater, still less than 10, but it's a lot greater, a lot lower than it was now. And I was homeless, and I had great mentors who took me in and made space for me to sleep. And around this time, I got reconnected with my biological sister, which led to a very heavy 1-hour conversation about what we believed each other was, where each other was, the misconceptions of growing up in foster care for me, as well as on her end, the misconceptions of what it meant to be adopted by a family. What we believed that to happen versus what we both share with each other what actually happened. And did we grow close then and there? No, absolutely not. It wasn't really but by chance of what my mom said, my biological mother said. And I remember, and I'll share with this next week, what it really meant to speak to my mom one last time, to be reconnected with my mom, and having that conversation that I'll share with you in the next episode. But I remember all of the feelings that I felt aging, being in care, and I remember just letting it all out. And the funny thing about that is, right, because at 20, right before I aged out, during COVID, I think it was right before COVID, I went back to my birth home, and I remember the feeling of not feeling too much of anything. I remember because the birth home was foreclosed, so I could walk around the property, and yeah, it was an interesting time. So I just remember feeling like, oh, I don't want to talk to her. But my sister, and if you're listening to this, dear sister, I love you, but I hated that you made me do that. But it's okay, because we talked for an hour. And within that hour, maybe the first 5 minutes, I had the opportunity to talk, get everything out. Told her, oh, don't talk to me again. Don't talk to me. Leave me alone. Stop checking on me. Blah, blah, blah. And if it ended right there, I would have felt extremely bad for that to be the last things I've ever said to my mother. But it wasn't. Because the rest of the 55 minutes, we got the chance to talk and to heal. And for some reason, looking back at that conversation, it felt like it was the last time. So, throughout that time, I got back into the college I was attending, West Georgia. And in my senior year, I was getting ready to graduate. I passed all of my classes, and I'm getting ready for my last semester of college. And then, boom, my mom dies. And it hurt to not only see my mom, to know my mom passed away, but she passed away on Mother's Day. She passed away on Mother's Day of 2024. And not only did she pass away from Mother's Day in 2024, my cousin, who I don't know too well, but he's my first cousin, he sends me a picture of my mom's dead body. And I still haven't processed it yet, but I live with that image in my head every single day. Confused on why he would send that to me. Sad to see that that's the last image I have of her. And at the time, I wanted her to come to my graduation, but just, it hurt. But I pulled through, and all glory be to God. But I graduated from college, and now, in this current moment, I am a youth advocate for foster care. I've had the opportunity to travel, to speak, to use my voice for good, to be in an area where I can not only be a part of change, but to advocate for change, be at the center of it, and even realize that there's many of stories just like mine. And to see that and to meet so many people, so many advocates, so many youth who walk the same trails as I did, it's an honor and a privilege. And to those who are fellow advocates, fellow professionals, or mentors, or even foster parents, even foster kids, I thank you. And at the time of this recording, I am less than a week away from being recognized and receiving an award for it. I've had the opportunity to work alongside school systems, juvenile court judges, different court systems. I went to the White House on my own accord, but not inside, but just outside of the gate. So not too close, but yeah. But overall, even it's led me to create this podcast. But yes, that's my foster care story. I've experienced the most hardest things any person that can experience. I've had to navigate a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I've experienced every level of abuse that you can imagine. I've caused a lot of pain because I was in pain. And for any foster parent that just happens to be listening to this, I apologize. I was a young man who did not know how to regulate his trauma, and I wish I could have kept it together. To anybody that I've hurt from a place of pain, I am sorry. And to anybody who have received any other form of grief or sorrow because of the things that I've did and I've shown, hopefully we can understand that it wasn't from a place of anger, but from a place of attempting to navigate every emotion I was feeling from a place of trauma. But on a positive note, what do I aim What was the focus behind sharing my foster care story? Well, it's this. The hope is that you're able to take my story as it is, right? Take my story and realize that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. For my believers out there, you can be used by God. You can be used by God. You're not unclean. You're not dirty. You're not filthy. You're not what your mind attempts to tell you to. And for everybody that's listening, me sharing my story in the means of honoring National Foster Care Awareness Month, I encourage you to know that you are more than qualified to step into the rooms that you believe that are for a selective group of people. And that on the other side of your fears, your trauma, your concerns, the sadness, the guilt, the shame, all tricks of the mind, is peace. So as I end this episode, and as we celebrate National Foster Care Awareness Month, I want us to honor it by recognizing this. And I'll leave you with this quote. Everybody's dancing to their own song. Some may be dancing a bit offbeat, a bit without a little rhythm. Some may be dancing with the wrong size shoes. Some may be dancing a different dance, and some may need to change the tune to what's suited for them. And what I mean by that is, as you go through life, my story included, speaking to myself as well as I speak to you, the listener, we're all attempting to navigate life. But there's no one person that's ever gotten it right. If so, there'll be a model for it. But as long as you give 100% to yourself, and for my believers out there, giving it all to God, then I think you'll do just fine to find your dancing shoes. With that being said, hopefully this episode has not been too intimidating, has not stirred you away, has made you unclick, unlisten, unfollow. And with that being said, my name is Reggie Holloway. This has been part 1 to the part 2 series. The next episode, I'll be talking a bit more personal as well, but I promise it's a good conversation. So stay tuned. I look forward to seeing you there. And this has been Outreach with Reggie. I've been Reggie Holloway, signing off. Take care.